He looked like any other drifter seeking shelter for the night. But when Clyde Baxter knocked on that boarding house door, he had no idea 3 women were already planning his future. What started as a simple request for a bed would become the most complicated night of his life. The dust from the trail still clung to Clyde's weathered coat as he approached the flickering lamplight in the window. His horse snorted with exhaustion, matching his own bone-deep weariness after 3 days of hard riding through unforgiving terrain. The wooden sign hanging crooked by the door read, "Oakwood Inn, Travelers Welcome." And right now, those words looked like salvation. He knocked twice, the sound echoing through the quiet evening air. Heavy footsteps approached from inside, accompanied by hushed whispers and what sounded like rapid tidying. The door swung open to reveal a woman of considerable size, her graying hair pinned back severely, wearing a flour-dusted apron over a dark blue dress. "Well, well," she said, her eyes lighting up as they took in his tall frame and weathered features. "Mabel Thornfield's the name, and you look like a man who's seen some hard miles." Clyde touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Evening, ma'am. Name's Clyde Baxter. I was hoping you might have a room available for the night. I can pay fair price." Mabel's smile widened impossibly further. "Oh, we certainly do. Come in, come in. Gertrude, Beulah, we have a guest." 2 more women appeared from what must have been the kitchen, both equally round and beaming with sudden excitement. The middle sister, Gertrude, wiped her hands on her apron while the youngest, Beulah, actually giggled behind her palm. "A real gentleman caller," Beulah whispered to her sisters, loud enough for Clyde to hear. Something in their eager expressions made Clyde's stomach tighten with unease. He'd expected simple hospitality, not this overwhelming enthusiasm. The 3 women exchanged meaningful glances, and he caught fragments of excited murmurs about "finally" and "perfect timing." "Just need a bed, and maybe some supper if you have it," Clyde said carefully, suddenly feeling like prey that had wandered into a carefully laid trap. "Oh, we'll take such good care of you," Mabel said, practically pushing him toward a worn but clean sitting room. "Won't we, sisters?" The way all 3 women looked at him then, with a mixture of hope and determination in their eyes, told Clyde this was going to be far more complicated than a simple night's rest. And as Beulah hurried off to prepare the special room, he realized he might have just walked into the most dangerous situation of his traveling life. The special room turned out to be their finest accommodation, complete with fresh linens, wildflowers in a mason jar, and what appeared to be their grandmother's best quilt. But as Clyde set down his saddlebags, he noticed something peculiar. The door handle had been polished to a shine, and there was a faint scent of perfume in the air. "Gertrude's making her famous beef stew," Mabel announced from the doorway, her bulk filling the frame entirely. "She only makes it for special occasions." "That's mighty kind, but I don't want to be any trouble," Clyde replied, though his stomach betrayed him with a loud rumble. "Nonsense. A man your size needs proper nourishment." Mabel's eyes traced his broad shoulders and work-hardened frame with obvious approval. "How long since you've had a home-cooked meal?" The honest answer was weeks, but something in her tone made him wary. "I get by well enough on the trail." "The trail?" Mabel clucked disapprovingly. "That's no life for a grown man. A man needs roots, stability, someone to care for him properly." Before Clyde could respond, Beulah appeared with a steaming basin of water and clean towels. "For washing up," she said breathlessly, her cheeks flushed pink. "I heated it special." The kindness should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a net slowly tightening around him. When was the last time 3 women had fussed over him like this? Never, that's when. And the way they kept exchanging those looks. "Supper's ready," Gertrude called from downstairs. The dining room table was set with their finest china, 3 places on one side and 1 solitary setting across from them. Candles flickered despite it only being early evening, and Gertrude had clearly outdone herself. Beef stew, fresh bread, green beans, and what looked like apple pie cooling on the windowsill. "Please sit." Mabel gestured to the lone chair like a throne. As Clyde settled himself, all 3 women took their seats across from him, watching his every move with rapt attention. He took a spoonful of stew. It was genuinely delicious, and they leaned forward collectively. "Good?" Gertrude asked hopefully. "Excellent, ma'am. Best I've had in years." The sisters practically glowed with pride. Beulah clasped her hands together. "We so rarely get to cook for a real man." "How rarely?" Clyde asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Well," Mabel said, cutting a meaningful look at her sisters. It's been quite some time since any gentleman travelers came through. Months, actually. Years, Beulah corrected quietly. Which is why, Gertrude added, ladling another helping into his bowl without asking, we want to make sure you're properly taken care of. The way she emphasized properly made Clyde's fork pause halfway to his mouth. He glanced around the table at 3 hopeful faces, noting how they'd all changed into their better dresses and fixed their hair since his arrival. I appreciate the hospitality, truly, but I'll be heading out first light tomorrow. The collective disappointment that crossed their faces was so profound it was almost comical. Almost. Oh, but surely you could stay just one more day, Beulah pleaded. There's so much we could show you around the property. And we hardly get to talk to anyone about the outside world, Mabel added quickly. Plus, Gertrude said, her voice gaining confidence, traveling alone is so dangerous. Wouldn't it be nice to have someone to worry about you? To have a real home? There it was. The trap had just revealed itself completely, and Clyde realized these 3 lonely women weren't just offering hospitality. They were auditioning him for something much more permanent. Clyde set down his fork carefully, choosing his words like a man diffusing dynamite. Ladies, I'm flattered by your kindness, but I'm not looking to settle down anywhere. I'm a traveling man by nature. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mabel's smile faltered, Gertrude's hopeful expression crumbled, and Beulah's eyes actually began to well up with tears. But why? Beulah whispered. Don't you get lonely out there all by yourself? The honest answer was yes, more than he cared to admit. But loneliness was safer than the complications that came with expectations he couldn't meet. It's just the life I chose. Chose? Mabel's voice carried a sharp edge now. Or is it the life that was forced on you by circumstances? Her perception caught him off guard. There had been reasons he'd taken to the trail, painful ones he didn't discuss with strangers, but these women were looking at him like they could see straight through to his wounded soul. Sometimes, Gertrude said gently, the best things in life are the ones we didn't plan for. We know you don't know us, Beulah added, leaning forward earnestly, but we're good women. We work hard, we're honest, and we'd never ask a man to be something he's not. We just want someone to share our lives with, Mabel said, her tough exterior cracking to reveal genuine vulnerability. This place gets mighty quiet with just the 3 of us. Clyde looked around the table at 3 faces filled with such raw hope it made his chest ache. These weren't scheming women trying to trap him. They were lonely souls offering everything they had to a stranger because they believed in the possibility of companionship. I understand your situation, he said slowly. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting company, but marriage, that's not something to rush into. Who said anything about marriage? Mabel asked, though her blush suggested otherwise. Well, I just assumed. We just want you to stay a while, Gertrude interrupted. Get to know us. Let us get to know you. See what develops naturally. The problem was, Clyde could already feel something developing. Not romantic love exactly, but a dangerous kind of comfort. The warmth of the room, the smell of home cooking, the sound of gentle voices after months of his own company. It was seductive in ways these women probably didn't even realize. One more day, Beulah pleaded. Just give us one more day to prove that staying could be good for all of us. Before Clyde could answer, a loud crash of thunder shook the house. Rain began hammering against the windows with sudden violence, and the wind howled like a living thing. All 4 of them looked toward the storm, and Clyde realized his decision had just been made for him. Looks like Mother Nature might have something to say about my travel plans, he said with a rueful smile. The sisters exchanged triumphant glances, and Clyde wondered if they'd been watching those clouds roll in all evening, just waiting for this moment. The storm raged through the night with supernatural intensity, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring to keep Clyde exactly where the Thornfield sisters wanted him. By morning, what had been a passable dirt road was now a river of mud that would bog down any horse foolish enough to attempt it. Coffee's ready, Gertrude called cheerfully from the kitchen, her voice carrying more enthusiasm than any woman should possess at dawn. Clyde emerged from his room to find all 3 sisters already dressed and bustling about with suspicious energy for such an early hour. The smell of bacon, eggs, and fresh biscuits filled the air, and the dining table was once again set like a feast. Sleep well? Mabel asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew he'd spent half the night listening to the storm and wrestling with his situation. Well enough, he replied, though the truth was he'd lain awake thinking about 3 lonely women and the genuine warmth in their eyes. Road looked passable? Oh my, no, Beulah said quickly, perhaps a little too quickly. Flooded completely. Could be days before it's safe to travel. Days. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Clyde moved to the window and peered out at what was indeed a thoroughly impassable mess of standing water and churned earth. His horse stood in the small barn, contentedly munching hay, apparently unconcerned about their extended stay. "Well," he said, accepting the inevitable, "I suppose I should earn my keep somehow. What kind of work needs doing around here?" The transformation in the sisters was immediate and dramatic. Mabel actually clapped her hands together. Gertrude beamed like Christmas morning, and Beulah bounced on her toes with excitement. "The roof's been leaking in the back room," Mabel said. "And the fence needs mending where the wind knocked it down," Gertrude added. "Plus the firewood needs splitting for winter," Beulah chimed in. They'd clearly been cataloging every possible task to keep him busy. Clyde found himself almost amused by their transparent enthusiasm. "Sounds like plenty to keep me occupied." "We'll pack you a lunch," Gertrude offered. "And bring you fresh water," Beulah added. "And check on you every hour to make sure you're not overworking yourself," Mabel finished. "Every hour might be a bit much," Clyde said gently. "Every 2 hours, then," Mabel compromised without missing a beat. As the morning progressed, Clyde found himself settling into an unexpected rhythm. The physical work felt good after days in the saddle, and the sisters' attentiveness, while overwhelming, came from a place of genuine care. Gertrude's lunch was exceptional, Beulah's fresh water was always perfectly cool, and Mabel's periodic check-ins included useful suggestions about the property. But it was during the afternoon, while he was splitting logs behind the house, that he overheard a conversation that changed everything. The sisters were on the back porch, apparently thinking he was out of earshot. "He's perfect," Beulah whispered. "Strong, polite, and he actually listens when we talk. And handsome, too," Gertrude added with a giggle. "The question is," Mabel said, her voice more serious, "how do we convince him to stay permanently? A man like that, he could have his pick of women in any town. Maybe that's exactly why he's alone," Beulah said thoughtfully. "Maybe he's been hurt before." "Then it's our job to show him that not all women are the same," Mabel declared. "We just have to prove we're worth staying for." Clyde's axe paused mid-swing. They weren't scheming to trap him. They were planning to win him over honestly. The difference mattered more than he'd expected. That evening, the sisters' campaign to win him over began in earnest. Though they tried to make it look natural, Gertrude prepared a meal that belonged in a fancy hotel, complete with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and vegetables from their garden. Beulah had picked wildflowers for the table and somehow found time to press his trail clothes. Mabel regaled him with stories of their late parents and how they'd built this place from nothing. "Papa always said this land had good bones," Mabel explained, gesturing toward the windows. "Said it would provide for the right family. And it has," Gertrude added quickly. "We've never gone hungry, never wanted for anything essential. Except company," Beulah said quietly, then blushed at her own boldness. Clyde found himself drawn into their stories despite his better judgment. The Thornfield sisters had lived their entire lives on this property, caring for aging parents until their deaths, never having the chance to court or marry or experience life beyond these walls. They'd sacrificed their youth for duty, and now they were trying to reclaim something they'd never had. "What about you?" Mabel asked suddenly. "What's your story? A man doesn't take to the trail without reasons." The question hung in the air like smoke. Clyde took a long sip of coffee, buying time. He'd perfected the art of deflecting personal questions, but something about these women's honesty made his usual evasions feel dishonest. "Had a spread down in Texas," he said finally. "Lost it to drought and debt. Lost my wife to fever the same year." The silence that followed was profound and respectful. No one offered empty platitudes or tried to minimize his loss. Beulah reached across and briefly touched his hand, a gesture so simple and genuine it nearly broke his carefully constructed walls. "That's why you keep moving," Mabel said softly. "Staying still hurts too much." Her understanding hit him like a physical blow. "Something like that. But healing doesn't come from running," Gertrude said gently. "It comes from letting good people care about you again. And maybe," Beulah added with tentative hope, "letting yourself care about them too." Before Clyde could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Horses' hooves splashed through the muddy yard, and rough voices carried through the rain. Mabel's face went pale as she peered through the window. "The Garrett boys," she whispered. "They've been drinking again." 3 men dismounted in the yard, their movements unsteady but purposeful. The largest one, a bearded brute with mean eyes, banged on the front door with his fist. "Open up." "Thornfield women. We know you got a stranger in there." Clyde stood immediately, his hand instinctively moving to where his gun belt hung by the door. "Friends of yours?" "Trouble," Mabel said grimly. "They've been pestering us for months, thinking 3 women alone are easy targets." "They want the property," Gertrude added, fear creeping into her voice. "And they think they can scare us into selling," Beulah finished. The banging grew more insistent, and one of the men laughed nastily. "Come out and introduce us to your boyfriend. We got some business to discuss." Clyde looked at 3 frightened faces and realized the storm had brought him here for a reason that had nothing to do with romance. Clyde strapped on his gun belt with practiced efficiency, checking the cylinder with a smooth motion that spoke of years of experience. The sisters watched him transform from gentle guest to something harder and more dangerous. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "All of you." "You don't understand," Mabel protested. "There are 3 of them, and they're mean when they're drunk. And I'm meaner when people threaten women under my protection," Clyde replied, his voice carrying an edge that made all 3 sisters step back. The banging stopped as footsteps moved around the house. One of the men was trying to peer through windows while the others remained at the front door. "We know you can hear us," the leader shouted. "Thad Garrett don't like strangers on his territory." Clyde opened the door before anyone could stop him, stepping onto the porch with calm confidence. 3 pairs of bloodshot eyes focused on him, taking in his height, the gun at his hip, and the steady way he carried himself. "Evening, gentlemen," Clyde said pleasantly. "Something I can help you with?" Thad Garrett, a mountain of a man with broken teeth and suspicious scars, spat into the mud. "You can help by mounting up and riding out. This here's family business." "Funny thing about that," Clyde replied, his tone remaining conversational. "These ladies aren't your family. Matter of fact, they asked me to stay and help out around the place." "Did they now?" The second man, wiry and nervous, laughed unpleasantly. "3 old maids got themselves a pet gunslinger? They got themselves a neighbor who doesn't appreciate late-night visits from drunk strangers," Clyde corrected. "Especially ones who seem confused about property lines." Thad's face darkened. "You got a smart mouth, stranger. We've been trying to buy this place fair and square for months, and they've been saying no for months," Clyde observed. "Most men would take the hint." "Most men ain't Garrett men," the third brother snarled, his hand drifting toward his gun. Clyde's eyes tracked the movement without his head moving an inch. "I'd think real careful about that next decision, friend." The tension stretched like a wire ready to snap. Rain continued to fall steadily, turning the standoff into something out of a fever dream. Behind him, Clyde could hear the sisters breathing, their fear palpable, but their faith in him absolute. "This ain't over," Thad finally said, his survival instincts apparently overriding his liquor-fueled bravado. "You won't be here forever, and when you leave, when I leave," Clyde said quietly, "it'll be my choice and my timing, and anyone who bothers these ladies in my absence will answer to me personally. That clear enough for you?" The promise in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just protective posturing. This was a man who kept his word, no matter how inconvenient it might be. The Garrett brothers exchanged uncertain glances. They'd expected to intimidate 3 defenseless women, not face down a man who looked like he'd walked through hell and learned to enjoy the heat. "Come on," Thad muttered to his brothers. "We'll settle this later." They mounted their horses with significantly less swagger than they'd dismounted with, splashing away into the night like the cowards they were. Clyde remained on the porch until their hoofbeats faded completely, then turned back to find 3 faces staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "Well," Mabel said finally, her voice slightly shaky. That was illuminating. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a benediction, revealing a world washed clean by the storm. The road, while still muddy, was passable again. Clyde stood in the yard with his saddlebags packed, watching his horse stamp impatiently, ready to resume their journey. But everything had changed in the space of one confrontation. The 3 sisters stood on the porch, no longer the desperate women who had tried to trap him with kindness. They held themselves differently now, with dignity, with strength, with the knowledge that they were worth protecting. "The Garretts will be back," Mabel said matter-of-factly. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they'll be back." "Then I guess I'll have to be here when they come," Clyde replied. surprising himself with how natural the words sounded. Beulah's eyes widened. I mean a man can get tired of running from one place to another without purpose, Clyde said, looking around the property with new eyes. And this place, it's got good bones like your father said. Gertrude clasped her hands together. But we don't want you to stay just to protect us. You want someone who chooses to be here, Clyde finished. Someone who sees value in what you've built and wants to be part of it. He walked to the fence line he'd mended the day before, running his hand along the sturdy rails. I lost everything once because I was so focused on building something alone that I forgot what I was building it for. Maybe it's time I tried a different approach. Mabel stepped forward, her voice careful. And what approach would that be? Partnership, Clyde said simply. You three know this land, know how to make it prosper. I know how to protect it and work it. Seems like we might all benefit from the arrangement. And if someday you decide you want to move on, Beulah asked, her voice small. Clyde smiled, the first truly relaxed expression they'd seen from him. Then I reckon you'll have to convince me all over again that staying is worth it. Think you're up for that challenge? The transformation was immediate. 3 faces lit up with joy so pure it was almost blinding. But more than that, they carried themselves like women who had been chosen, not settled for. There's just one condition, Clyde added, his tone serious again. Their smiles faltered slightly. What's that? Next time the Garretts come calling, you ladies stay inside and let me handle it. A man's got his pride after all. Mabel laughed, a sound like music in the morning air. I think that can be arranged. As Clyde unsaddled his horse and led it back to the barn, he reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd come here seeking nothing more than shelter for one night. Instead, he'd found 3 women who saw past his walls to the man underneath, who offered him not just a place to stay, but a reason to stop running. Sometimes the best destinations were the ones you never planned to reach. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where honor and determination meet unexpected challenges in the untamed frontier. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.